Okay, so the problem that I have with The Last Barman Poet is that Tom Cruise's character, Brian Flanagan, he just gives himself the title poet. Like, I don't think that's something that you can just decide to do one day. You can't wake up and go, I think I'll be a poet for a bit now. It's like, if you play golf a couple of times, that doesn't make you a golfer. It doesn't mean, you can't go to a party when someone says, oh, what is it that you do? You can't say, I'm a golfer, because like that kind of like always gets found out. Like, someone will say, you're not a golfer. I saw you the other day in Great Yarmouth playing crazy golf by yourself, drunk. And when you couldn't get it through that little windmill, you started to cry. But that's kind of what he's done, is kind of Brian Flanagan has gone to a service station and printed out a load of business cards that say poet on them. And he's kind of gone to this bar and gone, hello everyone, I'm a poet by the way. And I'm gone, oh fair enough, that's really exciting, well done for you. And so like, you will get cut out. Like if Brian Flanagan's grandma died, get a phone call from his mum and say, oh, your grandma's died, Brian Flanagan, and she would she'd say a suitable, like, would be suitable to if you did a poem at her funeral. Like, I don't know what he would do, but it wouldn't honour her life very well. Brian Flanagan was on an aeroplane, and the captain came over the tunnel and said, "This plane is going to crash. We're crashing thousands of feet a second. But in order to make our last moments on this earth beautiful, wondered if there was a poet on board." And everyone would go, yeah, he's a poet. Like when we were in the departure lounge, he kind of jumped up onto like the little check-in desk, and he's got everyone to start shouting more poems, more poems. And he kept saying, like he's got a book of his poems that he's like kept reading and writing. It was really exciting. Like, why don't you do a poem? And his Brian Flanagan's last words before he died would be, I'm not a poet. The person next to him would open the book and it'd just be page after page of pictures of his own face. Okay, so a few weeks ago, Simon Armitage interviewed Morrissey in The Guardian. Like, I assume most people here have read that. I think it's one thing that defines a homework crowd, is people get quite excited about Simon Armitage interviewing Morrissey. And it was a really interesting interview. Like Morrissey displayed his kind of characteristic, like dry wit and bizarre racism. And the most interesting thing was Morrissey does this thing where he kind of flips the interview round and he starts kind of questioning his interviewer. And he said to Simon Armitage, when did you kind of start telling people you were a poet? When did you kind of say that you were a poet? And Simon Armitage said, well, when other people said that I was a poet, that's when I decided. And I thought it was a really interesting answer. But Morrissey kind of disagreed. He said, I think that you discover when you were a poet. Someone doesn't walk up to you, tap you on the shoulder and say, excuse me, you are a poet. Which I don't really agree with, but like Simon Armitage claims that Morrissey isn't a poet. He said, poets write poems requiring no backbeat, no melody, and no performance. Being the author of There Is a Light That Never Goes Out and other works of genius doesn't make you W.H. Auden. And so using that theory, if Morrissey isn't a poet, then maybe Brian Flanagan isn't a poet either. And when we were started out on this quest, to see what other people would do, and like comedians have this thing, like it said about a good comedian that they could make the phone book funny, and we thought, well, could a really good poet make this, like not change the words but make it a beautiful poem? And so this is how like one of our greatest poets, the previous poet laureate, would tackle